welcome back to another set review. So I am super pumped for this set, Midnight Hunt. I'm a massive Werewolves fan, so having a Werewolf set was really enticing to me. My first commander deck was a Ulrich of the Prowling Horde deck that was a modern deck that didn't quite work, so I made it into commander when I found out about the format. So super pumped. So this set review is specifically about mono black. I love building mono black decks, so I'm kind of looking at these cards with the perspective of building mono black decks and how they might be included in those. So you know, it's not really going to cater for other colors, so we'll really have that lens to focus on. So yeah, so super excited. So we'll go through first, we'll go through the legendary creatures, just to kind of get an idea of what might be some new decks that come out of this set. I guess overall, I think black got a few nice things to try out. So that's great. A few new toys, which is good. So this will include the Midnight Hunt standard set, as well as the commander set. I just kind of grouped them together as all Midnight Hunt cards when it comes to commander. So we'll go through. So the first one is Giza, Glorious Resurrector. So interesting card, this one. It kind of reminds me of like a light Tergrid, so having the exile clause is nice. There's actually quite a few exile effects in this set, which is nice. And so at the beginning of upkeep, you're going to get put all of those creature cards back. Okay, interesting. And they get decayed. So decayed, you know, they can't block, and when they attack, you sacrifice it at end of combat. So they come back with that drawback, but you get all the creatures that have died. Yeah, this seems really powerful. I feel like it kind of is very similar to a Tergrid deck. I feel like there's been a few, even with the last set, with Lorcan, I feel like that was just a Tergrid deck as well. So this one, I feel like maybe they've made Tergrid and now they're just making watered down versions of Tergrid for people to try. So, okay, the exile, that's nice. The beginning of upkeep. So we're going to want to obviously have our opponent's creatures die. So things like discarding mill are not going to matter. So we're going to have a lot of those die effects. So a lot of removal, a lot of making our opponent sacrifice. It's going to be Grave Pacts and Dictative Ereboses, Plague Crafters, things like that. So it's going to feel like a very Tergrid-esque deck. And your opponents are particularly going to enjoy it. Now you're going to get those creatures back beginning of upkeep, so we probably want to you're probably going to have a heavy removal deck with this small package of additional upkeeps, which don't exist in black, but we can copy the triggered ability, and that does exist. Lithiform Engine, and there's another one, can't remember off the top of my head. So you're gonna want those. You can also do Conjurer's Closet. So because with Conjurer's Closet, they come under your control, and they come under your control, and they'll lose Decayed. So that's kind of nice. So you probably want that small package. I really don't know how bad Decayed is gonna be. The fact that they can't block. So I think you're going to want to try to target your opponent's creatures that have nice end to the battlefield effects, and that's about it. But ultimately, relying on what your opponents have is not usually a great strategy, but I think it'll be a lot of fun. So I guess without, you know, burying the lead a little, I do kind of like this. I might even try building this and see what that kind of ends up being. I think I really like this card. which I guess is why I'm talking about it. 4 mana, 4/4 comes down early. Your 2 mana rock, hopefully, and then this comes down. So nice turn 3 card, and then you can start killing your opponent's creatures, which is probably not going to be that valuable. I don't know. I like this card. Okay, next one. Gorex the Tomb Shell. Very expensive. So 6 mana, 6 generic, 2 black. You're going to exile any number of creature cards from your graveyard. It's going to cost 2 less. So it's kind of like Delve, but it's specifically creatures from your graveyard. Has Death Touch 4/4. When it attacks or dies, you get one of them back randomly. There's the Ethereal Forager, which sees Legacy play, but doesn't see too much Commander play, I guess. So I guess you want this in a heavy. It's gonna have to be heavy creatures, dredge, probably. Yeah, so we have to exile creatures out of our own graveyard, which is usually not something that you want to do. But when you attack or die, you're going to get one of those creatures back. If you can entomb a very special creature, that might work, but I feel like that's a lot of hoops just to get something into your hand. Ultimately, I think this is a pretty average card. I think the appeal here will be that it's a zombie turtle, and people will really love that. Death Touch means that you probably will get attacks and it will be okay. But sometimes it's nice to have Death Touch to block. So yeah, ultimately I'm not too impressed. I don't really care. I think you're going through a lot of hoops to do that. But it's a zombie turtle, so people love that stuff. Jada, Ghoul Caller of Nephalia. 2 mana, so 1 in black. The beginning end step, you get, if you have nothing with Decayed, you're gonna get a 2/2 zombie with Decayed. That's a 1/1. I really love how cheap this is. I think that this works better in 99s of decks rather than the hand of its own, because to be honest, the effect is pretty average. So if you have nothing with Decayed, you're going to get a Decayed zombie. There are some cards that kind of represent the Decayed zombie and how much that might be worth, which is pretty much maybe, from what I believe, maybe less than 1 mana. Like these 2/2 zombies, not really going to be worth much. It really is, can you sacrifice it for value? Your Phyrexian Arenas, your Ashnod's Altars, things like that. But I think if you want to be doing that, you could probably do that better. I'd probably want Bitter Blossom over this. It is only your end step that it happens, so you're going to get 1 zombie a turn, assuming that you're going to do something with it. It's not really something that I'd care about, but you might want something like this in. Yeah, it's like an Ophiomancer, but just not even close. Ultimately, I'm not excited. I think this could make 99s in some decks where you want to make a creature a turn, something like maybe Rankle, Master of Pranks, where you just want to be sacrificing 1 creature, because then it's going to force everyone else to sacrifice. But you're getting it at your end step, so you're not going to get it until the next turn. Actually, that might be okay, right? So you get this down on 2, and then Rankle comes down later. That might be okay. So something like that, where you want to be sacrificing just 1 creature on your turn, sure, that could be okay. But I think it would be better than 99. I imagine this would be a very generically boring deck to make. Jaren, Corrupted Bishop. Very, very interesting card. So 3 mana value. When it enters, or when a human dies, non-token human dies, you're going to lose a life. You're going to create a white human token. And then to give a human lifelink, and then if you're at 13 life at the beginning of your end step, you can pay 6 to transform it. So transforming will turn it into Ormondol the Corruptor, Blind Trample, lifelink, sacrifice another creature, draw a card, 6/6. Ultimately, I think that the appeal of this is not the transform. I think it's going to be very difficult to get to 13 life. I mean, you have things like Necropotent, sure, you can get down to 13 life, but then you've got to pay 6 mana and then transform it into this flying trample lifelink sacrifice creature draw a card 6/6. Like, it's not really that interesting. I think the appeal will be to try to flip it for some people, but I don't think that's where this is particularly interesting. I think it's a nice to have, and if you get it, you get it kind of thing. But 6 mana for that effect doesn't seem too interesting. I think the interesting thing is whenever another non-token human you control dies, you get another token. And the lifelink, I think that's actually quite nice. It's 3 mana, 2/3. So it's going to come down early. You probably going to have this in a Shadowborn Apostles deck, or maybe try and have this at the helm of your Shadowborn Apostle deck, which could be interesting. Or you have a Humans Aristocrats deck. Could be quite fun to build, and then just have the transform as a nice to have. Sure, I think it could be a fun Aristocrats build where it's like a mono black Humans Aristocrat deck. Sure, you don't get Blood Artist, but maybe that might be an exception. But you do get Zulaport Cutthroat. Yeah, that could be fun to build. Also, I do think this is the best art in the entire set. Like, this is just fantastic. Like, the story that it's telling. Yeah, top notch. So overall, I think, yeah, Jaren's interesting. Giza is interesting. I think Giza will probably be the most popular of them, followed by maybe the Zombie Turtle, just because of the Zombie Turtle. So yeah, I think it's okay, but there's not really something new here, except for maybe Jaren is a bit interesting. But yeah, ultimately, I don't think there's going to be too much here. Okay, Reds and Mythics. So first, Bloodline Culling. -5/-5, or tokens -2/-2, instant 3 mana. I don't think people are really looking for this effect too much. If you are in a very heavy tokens kind of meta, maybe you might want this. Sure, it has a bit of flexibility, but ultimately I think it's probably not something people will play with. Champion of Perish, 1 mana 1/1. It's gonna be great. I think people are gonna put this in zombie decks. Normally you're probably not looking for a zombie beater, but this can get out of hand quite nicely. You know, you're just gonna be playing a whole bunch of zombies, so, and it just comes down early. I think it's going to be okay, and I think people will put it in a zombie deck. I think it's one of the, probably could be one of the first things you cut. It'll kind of be on that precipice where you may just kind of cut it from some decks, but people will play this in their zombie deck, sure. Crowded Crypt. So this one's from the Commander set. So it's 3 mana Mana Rock. Whenever a creature dies, you put a corpse counter on it, and then you get that many zombie tokens with Decayed for 6 mana and sacrificing this. Interesting. I don't think it's quite valuable enough. 6 mana is a lot, but you can do it at instant speed, which is nice. But ultimately, you know, you can't block with these things, so it's really just for attacking or sacrificing. It's nice. I think people will put this in their deck. I think you have to have a lot for a 3 mana Mana Rock. But like in a zombie deck where you are in theory having lords, you know, you're going to have 1-2 lords on the battlefield. You know, these 2/2s are going to become, you know, 4/4s. And you're going to get them at instant speed. But it's a lot of mana to hold up. A lot of creatures do die, so if you get this out early enough, I think this is playable. I think people will play it. I don't think you're going to have it too much. Like, this is going to be like Champion of Perish, where it's could be easily cut. But yeah, interesting. I like it, but don't like it too much. Cursive Leeches. So when you're going to attach it at the beginning of that keep, they're going to lose a life and you're going to gain a life. That's not a lot. It has Daybound, which probably is not going to be too relevant for black players. And on the other side is Leeching Lurker. Ultimately, a 4/4 lifelink. Who cares? Not particularly interesting. And beginning of the upkeep, they're going to lose a life and you're going to gain a life. Also not particularly interesting. You will play this in your Grixis Curse deck, sure. Curse of the Restless Dead. So 3 mana. Whenever a land enters under that enchanted players, you're going to get a zombie. How many zombies do I want for this to be good? 4? 5? Maybe? You know, if your pod always has a landfall deck, sure. Or you can even enchant yourself if you're playing a lot of lands. Ultimately, I don't think it does too much. I think it's too slow. But if landfall, you know, is a big thing where you are, then sure. Ghoul's Night Out, best name. So 5 mana. So each player, so this does include yourself, is going to choose a creature in a graveyard and you're going to put down the battlefield. It's going to be a zombie and it's going to have Decayed. So this reminds me of Sepulchral Primordial, which is interesting. So that's a 7 mana creature, and it's only for opponents. So this one does include your own graveyard. So at least you know that you are getting, you know, the most optimal creature that you could probably get. So a nice Entomb or Buried Alive before this, you know what you're getting. It's going to have Decayed. But because you know that it's coming, you're going to be able to build around that. Is the value of your opponents. Now, your opponents, you don't really have control about what goes in the graveyard or what they're playing. But 5 mana for 4 creatures, it feels like good value. I don't know what deck kind of wants this. I think it's just, this is just like a generic black value reanimation spell. I like it. I'm going to try this one for sure. I think it really depends on how bad Decay is going to feel. And I think in a black deck, it's not going to feel that bad. Of course, we have Giza, we have Gorex. Cool. Graveyard Trespasser. Interesting. So Werewolves. Yeah, I'm a massive fan of Werewolves, but ultimately the Werewolf mechanic is not very good. It is Daybound, Nightbound is obviously better than it was previously, but ultimately I think that that mechanic is still not that great in Commander. Albeit, you know, it's a lot of fun. So if that's what you're going for, then that's great. So when it enters, it's going to exile target creature or target card from graveyard. Okay, and they're going to lose a life. Sure. This 3 mana 3/3. Ward is nice where it discards a card. On the other side, it's two target cards. And they're going to lose a life. Yeah. Ultimately, I don't think this really does anything. This seems more like a constructed level card. Sorry. Standard or something like that. Yeah, if you're building a Jund Werewolves deck, sure, you might include this. Jada, we already talked about. Mask of Grizzlebrand. So 3 mana, so 1 generic, 2 black. It's going to give your creature flying lifelink, and when it dies, you're going to get X life. You may pay X life, where X is the power. If you do, you can draw X cards. And it's Quip of 3. Ultimately, I feel like this is too expensive. I really dislike equipments that cost 3 to equip. If this was maybe 2, it might have felt better. Flying lifelink is nice. It doesn't give any boost to stats. I wish it was like, you know, flying lifelink and, you know, you get up to 7 power and toughness. Like it's like Grizzlebrand or something. That'd be cool. You will play this maybe in your Voltron deck, like Corlash maybe, to Blackblade. You could play something like this maybe. where your swamps is your power, how much swamps you have. Yeah, I think some decks will try it, but ultimately I think the equip is too expensive. Prowling Geist Catcher. Oh yeah, this right. This one's a very interesting card. So whenever you sacrifice another creature, you're gonna exile it. If it's a token, you put a +1/+1 on it, right? Interesting. So, and when it leaves the battlefield, you're gonna return those cards with it that were exiled with it to the battlefield under your control. So, if you exile tokens, you get a +1/+1, but they're not going to come back. So, sure. If you need to, like, if you have a sack outlet and you are attacking with your decayed zombies, sure, you're gonna get the +1/+1s. But whenever you sacrifice another creature, you exile it. So, and those sacrificed creatures will come back. It's interesting. It leaves the battlefield, so it's going to include exile as well. But this is great, kind of board wipe hate. You know, if you have a sack outlet and a board, and someone goes to do a board wipe, you just sack everything, and then when this dies, everything's gonna come back. That's kind of nice. I'm trying to think of a way to abuse this, and I can't think of any. I think this is gonna be just a generically, like a just good card to have, but ultimately it might make the cuts of lots of decks. Ravenous Rotbelly. So 4 generic and a black for a 4/5. When it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice up to 3 zombies. When you sacrifice 1 or more zombies this way, each opponent sacrifices that many creatures. So yeah, so 3 zombies, you get 3. Each opponent sacrifices that many creatures. Okay, so yeah, so they'll sacrifice 3 creatures. Note that you can sack itself. So this is like Fleshbag Marauder, but just all grown up. Yeah, I kind of dig this one. You're gonna get sacrificing 3 creatures. They do have specifically be zombies, so you are only gonna play this in your zombie deck, which I don't think is a problem. And you got to get 3 creatures. 3 creatures is actually quite a lot to sacrifice for an opponent. I think 3 creatures is probably pretty normal for anything outside of something that's aggressive, or very creature focused, like a elves deck or something. So 3 creatures could get quite a lot of value. 5 mana. I think this one's playable. I think I'm gonna try this out in a zombie deck, that's for sure. Yeah, I kind of dig it. Sword of Specialist. So it's a 2 mana 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, your opponent's going to create a token, and when opponent's creatures die, put 1/1 counters on it. If you want to give your opponent's creatures in mono black, that's probably something. If you want to get kind of their dies triggers, maybe. But ultimately, you're just getting this kind of just big dumb beater that has no evasion or anything about it. This isn't like Champion of the Perished, where it's 1 mana, and it's when your creatures kind of come in. You know, that's just a simple beater. But this one requires a bit of work, and ultimately just is not that interesting. 2 mana, it's cheap. You might play this in your Edgar Markov deck, but that's not mono black, so I don't care. The Celestis. So this one's an interesting card. Probably not for mono black, although you could play it. It's 3 mana rock. When it's night, becomes day. If it's night, it becomes day. Otherwise, it's the other way. So if you want to be able to play with your nightbound, daybound cards, then sure. You're going to gain a life. You're going to draw. Ultimately, I don't think this is really too relevant for mono black. Tomb Tyrant, 4 mana Lord for zombies. Usually they come in 3, but that's fine. There is one 4 mana one that's playable. And then you can sacrifice a creature and return a random zombie from your graveyard, and you have to have at least 3 zombies. and you can only do it on your turn. Yeah, I mean, it's the Zombie Lord. Like, you kind of just play Zombie Lords, right? 3 mana, sack a creature. Yeah, I'll try this. Yeah, I kind of like it. It is random, which is going to be really inconvenient because you have to pull all your zombies out of your graveyard, then try to work out how to do it randomly. But yeah, I think it's okay. Plus, I like the art. Visions of Dread. So this is the one that's not in the Commander set, but is in the Collector's and set boosters, if that's too complicated for everyone. So 3 mana, you're going to put a creature card of their choice, so your target opponent's graveyard, their choice, onto the battlefield. Ultimately, I don't think these effects are too great. You don't really have too much control over your opponent's graveyards unless you want to try and build it around, but this is only a sorcery. Yeah, you really have to have something to manipulate your opponent's graveyards, which, you know, is a lot to just build around for a sorcery. It's nice that it has flashback and that it can be cheapened. So I don't know, in maybe if you got your Chainer deck or your Crick deck where this is even cheaper. Yeah, I don't know. Ultimately, I don't think the effect's too powerful. Zombie Apocalypse for some reason is a reprint and it's appearing here even though I've filtered out reprints. It goes in your zombie deck, sure. Hostel. So it's a colorless land. So pay 1 and sacrifice a creature. You're gonna put a soul counter on. You're gonna remove it when it has 3. 2 mana to sacrifice a creature is sure whatever. It's kind of nice, but I would still play high market over this just because I want that kind of instant speed sack. I can only do this as a sorcery. And then it's going to flip over to this Creeping In, which attacks, and you exile a creature card from your graveyard, which is usually not something I want to do. And then each opponent's going to lose X, and you're going to gain X. And it can phase out, so I lose the ability for that land, so I'm down 1 land, and I'm exiling creature cards from my graveyard. It could be nice with, I guess, the random effect of getting something out of your graveyard. Yeah, ultimately, I don't think this effect is really that powerful. 3/7, I don't really care for. So yeah, why this is a mythic this is probably just going to be the most bulk of mythics ever. Jaron, we have a chat about Lord of the Forsaken. This card is just, the more you look at it, the more you're just like, oh, this seems really interesting. I feel like they just added more words and more words and more words, and something's going to be busted with this. So 4 and 2 black, flying, trample, sure, 6/6. You know, those are generic. Pay 1, sacrifice another creature, target player mills 3 cards. Sure, if you have infinite tokens, infinite mana, then you can mill out everyone. Ultimately, everything but the last 2 lines probably doesn't really matter. So the last line's pay 1 life, add a colorless, spend this mana to only cast spells from your graveyard. So in mono black, there isn't too many ways that I could really think of. So there's Yawgmoth's Will and Magus of the Will that kind of allow you to cast things from your graveyard. This will go a lot better in other colors where you've got red for Underworld Breach and things like that. That's probably a more played one. But interestingly enough, so if you have Doubling Cube and you pay almost all your life and then use Doubling Cube to copy that mana, the copied that mana that's added to your mana pool does not have the restriction of spells from your graveyard. So you pay all your life, you copy it with Doubling Cube, and then you Torment of Hellfire. Fantastic. Like, I feel like that's probably the best way to do it for mono black, or Sanguinate, or whatever X spell of choice you want. Yeah. But ultimately, I think this is such a powerful effect. Now, is it bad because it's on a 6 mana for it's 6 mana? Maybe. I think it will see play. I think people are definitely going to try it. I think it's going to be better with other colors, but mono black still, I think it's still pretty good. I don't know if you don't play it, if you're not playing Yawgmoth's Will or Magus of the Will or Doubling Cube. Like, if I just had Doubling Cube in my deck, would I play this? Probably not. Like, you have to have those synergies. So like a Kess Dissonant Mage deck or something, you know, but they're not mono black, so yeah. Tainted Adversary. This is another one. This is like, I get why it's a mythic, but ultimately I don't think it's too good. So 2 mana, Death Touch 2/3. That's actually pretty good rate. It is a zombie, so you might just put this in your zombie deck. When it enters the battlefield, you're gonna pay 3. You're gonna put that many counters on, and you're gonna get twice as many 2/2 black zombies. So it's kind of like Grave Titan. So for your Nim Death Mantle combos, sure, this would also be another redundant kind of Grave Titan. But I think we really need to find out how valuable the Decayed tokens are. And if you can have a way of utilizing them, then sure, you know, that's great. But then ultimately you're just left with a, you know, 3/4/4/5 Death Touch zombie. Ultimately, I don't think it's that interesting, but people put it. It's a zombie, you know. People put it in a zombie deck. If I pulled this out of a pack, I'd put it in. I don't think I'd buy the single, but yeah, if I pulled it in a pack, I would probably try it. The Meat Hook Massacre. This is a super interesting card. Really, really hyped. I think it's good. I don't think it's as great as people are putting out to be. I think this is one of those ones where it's the sum of its parts kind of effect, where almost not much of this is actually I'm interested in, but the fact is that it all comes together makes it interesting. Like, I'm not really looking for a you know, pay X and 2/2 for all creatures get -X. It's not really a card that I would be playing. And I'm not really looking too much for whenever a creature you control dies. Oh, sorry. I'm not looking for whenever a creature an opponent dies, you gain 1 life. That's not really an effect that I'm looking for. It's only because it has creatures you control, each opponent loses 1 life. So you need to have, I think you need to have a deck where you are killing and sacrificing your own creatures, which in mono black is not really a hard thing. But for instance, I wouldn't put this in my Rankle deck, but I'd put it in my Caretaker deck. Probably, yeah. I don't think in terms of board wipes, if I'm looking for a 4th board wipe, I'd probably put this, or maybe 3rd, 4th board wipe. I'd consider this, but it really has to be an Aristocrats deck. You know, a Yara might be good with this, where you're not really, you know, you're going to be destroying your opponent's creatures, but, you know, and that life gain's nice, but it's more about, you know, you're sacrificing your own creatures. Yeah, so it has to go in a very specific deck. I don't think you just slam it in any deck. But if you are playing, you know, Bastion Remembrance, Blood Artist, Zulaport Cutthroat, you're probably looking for an additional one. I'd play this over the 4 mana versions of Blood Artist and Zulaport Cutthroat, Vindictive Vampire, and Valkyrath Noble. So I'd probably play that over them. And, you know, enchantment's harder to remove. It's versatile. I think it's good. I don't think it's, you know, deserves its hype. I think this might be overpriced. I would love if this was a $10 mythic, I think, but ultimately, yeah, I definitely try to find somewhere for it. So okay, so now commons and uncommons. You know, I'm not going to go through all of these, but some I'd like to, you know, kind of point out as interesting things to include. So interesting one, Dreadhound. This effect is great whenever a creature dies or is put into a graveyard. Each opponent loses life. The problem is it's not a 6/6. So, you know, and it has a mill, which is unfortunate. Maybe you have this in kind of like a budget aristocrats deck, sure. The effect is nice, but it's on a 6 mana 6/6. Who, you know, we don't really care. Ghoulish Procession. This is like open the graves, but it is so it's 2 mana, so it's really cheap. But one or more non-token creatures dies, you get the 2/2. So and it can only trigger once per turn. So if you are sacrificing creature cards each turn, like Shirei, you might want this effect, but you're only getting a 2/2 with Decayed. Like, I don't play Open the Graves in that deck anymore, so I probably don't want that. But this would be a budget version of that. I mean, it's a few dollars the other version, but you also have Tormod the Desecrator that does a similar thing. But ultimately, I think this is probably the worst of that. But yeah, something to consider. Infernal Grasp, just great removal. If you are playing Go for the Throat, you probably just put this. It's not going to go in every deck, that's for sure, because I think the 1 mana versions of this is better. Things like Tragic Slip and things like that, if I was looking, but those will go in certain decks. So yeah, but if you are not a kind of Grave Pact, Dictate of Erebos kind of deck, where your main reason to destroy creatures through sacrifice, then yeah, like if it's just like mono black control, your Toshiro or something like that, yeah, I'd put this in. But I think that's really good. Moonsilver Key, really great. So 2 mana, so it comes down earlier. 1 mana, you can sacrifice. You're going to look for something with an artifact, with a mana ability, or basic land. So there are specific rules around what counts as a mana ability artifact with mana ability. So things like Gauntlet of Power is included in that. I don't know all the rules off my head that I'd have to look, but essentially if it's producing mana in some way, there's three rules for it. I can't remember off the top of my head. But like things like Gauntlet of Power would be included in that. So 3 mana to go search for a mana artifact with mana abilities, so Soul Ring, Mana Crypt if you play it, stuff like that. Is okay. I think this is going to be nice and budget. You've got things like Idyllic Tutor that gets enchantments in white for 3 mana, so it's kind of hit that same kind of area, and you can play this on 2 earlier and then kind of play it, you know, when you need later. I think it's good. I think it's going to be great in a lot of generic decks, like a generic card. It could be something you can cut, but yeah, mono black, get a basic land, probably not relevant. I think you're obviously going to get Soul Ring pretty much 100% of the time, and 3 mana tutor for Soul Ring, probably still pretty good. Morbid Opportunist, interesting. So it's a 1/3, so very important that it has 1 power for Shirei. Whenever 1 or more other creatures die, draw a card. It can only trigger once per turn. So it has that drawback, but the fact is that if you are destroying someone's creatures or sacrificing your own creatures every turn, then this is going to net you, 4 cards around the table. So Shirei is very good at this. So I think that goes straight into there. And I think this effect can be abused somewhat. So if you're constantly bringing back sacrifice of creatures, then fantastic. Mystic Skull, not really worth it. Necrosynthesis, sorry. whenever a creature dies, you're gonna put a +1/+1 counter. Sure, you know, you can have your Gravedigger, Phyrexian Altar kind of combo where you're just kind of infinitely getting +1/+1s, and then you can look for your power and then put one of those cards. Yeah, so you can essentially two to your library when that creature dies. Sure, interesting. Blood Pact, it's basically I forget the card, but it's there's a card that is draw 2 cards and lose 2 life at instant speed. This one's target player, so you might put that in kind of your budget decks. It's nice that it's instant, but I don't really play a lot of this effect. Normally it's Knight's Whisper and Sign in Blood, which is 2 mana sorcery. The 1 mana for an instance, usually not too relevant, especially for a draw card. Diagraph Horde, I mentioned the Nim Death Mantle combo, so this would also work with that. I know there are creatures that are even cheaper than Grave Titan, and cheaper than this that also, but if you want as much redundancy for that effect, then you know, you might want to include that. In the life, so this is like Spark Harvest. So, but it's nice because this one exiles target creature or planeswalker rather than destroys it, so that's nice. Yeah, you obviously, if you're playing something like Spark Harvest, you might probably just replace this, but it's a nice budget remove, I guess. Anything else? Oh yeah, Novice Occultus. Whenever it dies, you're going to draw a card and lose 1 life. This is another Shirei card. Fantastic, has 1 power, so you know you want to draw as many cards in that deck. This Rotten Reunion was kind of my go-to about how much is a black zombie worth with Decayed. Instant speed, 2 mana, creates that zombie, and exiles a card from graveyard, and it has flashback. Like, this has a lot for just 1 mana instant speed, and it creates a Decayed, and it still has additional effects. So that's kind of why I've kind of gone, okay, I don't think a Decayed token's probably going to be worth a card in a lot of places. And that's it. So yeah, so that's my review. Mono Black. Ultimately, I think the set didn't add too much. I think the Decayed tokens will be interesting to play around with. But yeah, I don't think there's too much new here or terribly exciting. I'm excited for Giza, and I'm excited to try Lord of the Forsaken. Meat Hook Massacre will make a lot of decks. Ravenous Rotbelly, people probably will stick, like some of these zombies, these rare zombies, you probably just stick in your zombie deck. But there are so many good lords that it might be difficult. Ghoul's Night Out, I feel like might be a trap card, but I'm going to try it. So yeah, it could be a trap, but I think it's worth giving it a try. And yeah, that's about it. I don't think there's too much. I think if you have a zombie deck, like I do, you'll be excited because there's quite a few zombie cards. But outside of that, Lord of the Forsaken, super interesting. Yeah, Meat Hook. That's about it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I have a lot of fun doing these little set reviews. I love Mono Black. So it's good to kind of have a deep dive into it. I think it's a lot of fun. I'm super excited for this set, not for the black cards, unfortunately, but for the werewolf cards. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Thanks. I'll see you in the next video where I have a booster box that I'm opening, my first booster box. So yeah, thanks for watching.